Integers. We want to explore today what integers are and get a better understanding before we start using operations on integers. Okay. So, the question is, how do we use integers in our daily life? Well, in order to understand integers, we must understand whole numbers. And whole numbers here would be examples of 0, 1, 2, and 3. What do we notice about these numbers? We should notice that there are no negatives. Also, that there are no fractions or decimals. So in other words, whole numbers are going to be on the number line, starting with 0 and increments of 1 moving up. They do not include, however, the negative portion of my graph. It starts at 0 and everything above that would be whole numbers. So integers are very similar to whole numbers in that they also include the 0, the 1, the 2, the 3, and so forth, but they also include negative numbers. So I'm going to write down those characteristics. So they also have no fractions or decimals, but they are positive and negative whole numbers. On a number line, that would include 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and on. And it also include the negatives, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, and so on. Now take a moment and determine whether each number below is an integer or not. So we're going to take a look at 5 different numbers: negative 4, 5.2, 1,000, negative 3.5, and 0. Determine whether each is an integer or not. You can write yes or no next to it. So remember, an integer has no fractions or decimals, and it is a positive or negative whole number. So our first one is yes, no, yes, no, and yes. The reasons these are no, because 5.2 has a decimal, so therefore it's not an integer. Negative 3.5, it has a fraction that is also not an integer. Can you think of some examples of integers in our real life? So try to think of examples where you'd have both a negative and a positive number in a possible same situation. Here's an example, the annual mean temperature in the world. So you can see that here near the equator we have higher temperatures, right? The hotter temperatures, 80s and 90s. And then further away near the poles we have a blue area. That's when it's going to go down below 0, depending on whether it's Fahrenheit or Celsius, but you would have integers in those cases. So we can draw an example of temperature in our notes. 81 degrees would be a positive integer, negative 5 degrees would be a negative integer. Here's an example of being out in the ocean, and the ocean level itself is at 0, right? And above the ocean level, above our water level, we would have birds flying up in the air. That's a positive integer. And then we have fish that swim below sea level, and that would be a negative integer. Then we can add another little picture into our notes regarding sea level. Again, bird would be above sea level, the boat would be at sea level, and the fish that swim underneath the water would be below sea level. Can you think of any other examples? If you ever clicked this button before and you like something on Facebook, then that would be a positive integer. If you dislike something, that would be considered a negative integer. So we can add that as well to our notes. And then I have one other example for you. When you decide to go and start earning some money, you're going to get a paycheck for all your work, and you get money every week, every other week. Whenever they pay you, get a paycheck. That would be a positive integer. But then again, there's also bills you have to pay at the end of the month, which would be a negative integer. And lastly, you can also add that to your notes. So these are some good examples of what integers are. Next, we're going to start dealing with adding and subtracting integers.